By abandoning our allies, they're aiding our enemies. It isn't just short-sighted, it's self-defeating. Our enemies want to crush us. They see a chance to destroy America. The question is, will we let them? We can turn inward, but the outside world won't leave us alone. Our future will either be shaped by us and our friends, or it will be shaped by our enemies. Failing to act is the worst action of all, and delaying will only lead to more difficult decisions and a greater chance of catastrophe. The times we live in look like the 1930s. Our economy is weak. Our country is divided. Our leaders fail adequately to stand up for our allies, even as our enemies target them and set their sights on us. We know how that era ended. It ended with a victory, but at a terribly high price. We must never have to pay that price again, and there's still time to ensure we don't. The hour is late. We have to face the hard truths and do harder work. But I have faith that we'll rise to meet the challenge before us. If any country can still make it happen, it's ours. As my immigrant parents told me and my siblings, we are blessed to live in America. And as every generation of Americans proves, we always rally to defend that blessing. Thank you, and God bless.
Well, welcome to Hudson.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Are you prepared for Hudson staff and me to go around Washington referring to you as my colleague Nikki in the coming weeks and months?
I prefer Nikki. Others were moments in time. But yes, I'm very much looking forward to the partnership. You know, Hudson is just, I always have wanted to surround myself with quality and with courage and with those that have vision for not just this year, but 20 and 30 years out. And nothing defines that more than Hudson. Domestic policy, foreign policy. I wanted quality in the people that I was with, and I wanted courage that I'm with people who are gonna speak the hard truths. I think we need that now in America more than ever.
Well, I can see you're ready for the policy discussion, but before we do that, this is your first time in front of the Klieg lights on stage since exiting the presidential campaign. How is return to civilian life, so to speak? How are you doing?
You know, it's really good. I mean, it was weeks that I was sleeping 10 to 12 hours a day. I mean, the first thing I did was catch up on my sleep. I quickly got back to running, which I missed during the campaign. I was able to go and spend time with my parents who live with us and get Michael back home from deployment, which was a blessing, spend time with the kids. But I suspended truly with gratitude. So much gratitude. Gratitude towards the support of my family, even Michael, who was 8,000 miles away, amazingly supportive. Supportive of my friends who stood by me. Supportive of an amazing campaign team led by John Lerner, who is truly not just a dear friend, but a fantastic consultant. Betsy Ankney, you don't get better than that in a campaign chair. You know, Mary Kate Johnson, who was an amazing fundraiser, Cheney Denton, who I will forever value being our comms director, Leslie DeWeese, who's with me now, who managed our policy. You know, we just had amazing people who really love America. And so I'm grateful for them, and I'm grateful for the millions of people who have voted and continue to support us. So I had no regrets. We left it all on the field. I just have gratitude that I was able to go through the process and fight as hard as I could. And, you know, how blessed are we that we can live in a country where we can do that?
Well, some of them are here. And I could see them one by one smiling as you mentioned their names. So clearly you're a tight-knit group. And
they've earned it. They've earned it.
So let's turn to the speech. And there, one line that stuck out, and I'll just quote it, as you delivered it: "Our future will either be shaped by us and our friends, or it will be shaped by our enemies." I think there'd be a lot of analysts who would agree with that statement, but they might then ask, can the United States pull back from the world and expect our friends and allies to fill the void? Put another way, how important is American leadership to this alliance system that we've built?
Well, let me put it another way. Why would we want to leave our allies? America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. But you have to be a friend to get a friend. And I look back at 9/11. We needed a lot of friends after 9/11. So, one, America should want friends. But I saw at the United Nations, when America speaks, the world listens. And the world craves that moral clarity. The world craves that leadership. And it can, whether we're fighting for freedom, whether we're fighting for democracy, whether we're fighting for human rights, we owe it to all that is good about America to spread that far and wide. Because if we're not loud, our enemies will be. And so I think it's just as much a necessity for America to want our allies as it is for our allies to want America to lead, because they don't want to follow Russia and China. And I will continue to say, when America is weak, the world is less safe. And I think we're seeing that right now.
And we have some of our closest friends from the diplomatic corps here. I venture to say if a Russian official or a Chinese official delivered a speech like that, it would be a very Spartan crowd cheering them on in the audience. So I think that speaks to America's alliance network and friendships around the world. One friend and partner, of course, has become Ukraine. Mm-hmm. On the topic of the war in Ukraine, you gave a very full-throated endorsement of the Ukrainian cause in your remarks. There, too, maybe I can hear some of the faint howls of disappointment from the isolationists who might say, that's all well and good, Ambassador Haley, but that's sort of what we heard about, say, South Vietnam in the 1960s. And that sort of full-throated political support led us on a slippery slope into a conflict that we didn't want to be in. How do you answer that charge to them, or even to just the average American who might out there worry and have some fears watching a full-blown conflict erupting on the European continent?
It's very different. I mean, with Vietnam, we had 500,000 American troops there. We don't have that in Ukraine, and they have been amazing fighters. They want to fight this themselves. At that time in Vietnam, there was a lot of internal conflict. Ukraine is very united in the fact that they don't want Russia to take them over. They're very united in defending their freedom and defending their country. This is something we should want to do. Why would we want an enemy to beat a friend? I can tell you at the United Nations, Ukraine was an amazing friend to us. They supported us on almost everything. They showed up without me even asking them to be there. And now they're not asking for our troops. But this should have been over by now. And why are we just dangling out bits at a time to only allow them to survive and not work with our allies to give them the tools to win? They have the passion, they have the spirit, they have the ability. What they don't have is friends stepping up to the plate and having the courage to say, this is wrong what Russia has done. But not only that, look at what Putin said in one of his national speeches. He said it from his own words at the time of the invasion. This is not a war on Ukraine. This is a war on the West and NATO. Putin sees us as morally corrupt. That's all you should have to hear to know that defending Ukraine is defending ourselves.
And the Ukraine debate has expressed itself through our supplemental national security legislation debate, which I'm sure you track closely on your long runs thinking about national security in the world back in South Carolina. What was your reaction to watching that debate, that long, arduous journey that ultimately played out successful? They passed both chambers of the Congress. The president signed the legislation into law. But give us some of your thoughts and reactions to the supplemental debate and that entire issue set.
You know, I commend greatly Speaker Mike Johnson for stepping up and pushing through. I appreciate the Republicans and Democrats that had the ability to see that this is about national security, our national security. And I think that this is a conversation we need to have, but we wouldn't be having this argument or even this confusion if our leaders would step up and tell people why they should care. That's the amazing part of this. And Republicans and Democrats, rather than telling their constituents why we should care about Ukraine, why we should care about Israel, why we should care about what could happen to Taiwan. Instead, it can never be that they're so arrogant to think they know better and that the Americans just need to go along with them. Because Americans are very smart. And I think it's important that we let them know this is all connected. There is a reason that the Israelis wanted America and the West to support Ukraine, because they knew if Russia won, then Iran would win. There's a reason the Taiwanese want America and the West to support Ukraine, because they know, to support Israel, because they know that if Iran gets their way, it's only going to embolden China. Like, we need to see bigger than just these conflicts. We should never just see them in a silo. And so I appreciate the fact that we got this through. I think it was late. I think you can go and see what's happening in Ukraine now. I mean, we've lost a lot of ground just because of the lateness of this. I think the same thing we're seeing with Israel. We can't delay helping a friend. And I think that was the disappointment in all of it.
Speaking of disappointments, do you have any reaction to the ICC's move against Prime Minister Netanyahu? Remember, you're a former diplomat, ma'am.
But my fellow diplomats will tell you I wasn't always diplomatic. I always spoke hard truths. And, I'll say this. I would normally say I'm not surprised. At the United Nations, I saw every day the Israel bashing over and over and over again. I also saw that when Israel gets hit, everybody goes to support her. But they all turn against her when she tries to defend herself and hit back. But this ICC ruling, I'm not going to lie, literally is disgusting. You had 1,400 people butchered on October 7th. You had kids at a concert, and those girls were raped and mutilated and dragged through the streets of Gaza, where they said, death to Israel, death to America. And you're going to put that in the same sentence with Hamas and Netanyahu? It's truly, I don't know any other word, but disgusting. They've gone so far out of whack that it's why people don't trust it. It's why America doesn't consider the ICC to be reliable, but they just proved it themselves. I don't understand having a conversation where you put Israel and terrorists in the same sentence. In what world do we even treat them as the same? They were brutal, they were vicious, and they bragged about it and celebrated it. Israel didn't start this. That's the thing. Who started this? Israel didn't start this. But if this had happened to us, if this had happened to any country, what country wouldn't want to defend themselves? What country wouldn't go to great lengths to make sure it doesn't happen again? And truly, I have always seen Israel, like Americans, they value human life. They will go out of their way to make sure that they're avoiding any innocent casualties. In war, that's not easy. But you can't even put them in the same sentence as Hamas. It's disgusting, truly. And I hope that Congress will follow through and sanction those members of the ICC. That's the only way we can let them know this has got to stop.
And to show your solidarity, I believe you have some travel plans potentially to share.
I do. We will be going to Israel very soon. And it is really, I want Israelis to know Americans support them. Americans hear them. I think we should be talking about these hostages every single day. These families had suffered enough. I think that they need to know that, look, we are stronger together. And I want to come back and continue to tell everybody why we should care about Israel, why we should care about what happened, and how Iran is getting emboldened by the fact that we're suddenly starting to get divided on Israel. And I said in the beginning, shortly after October 7th, I said, if we leave Ukraine, I promise you they're going to want to leave Israel next. And look at what's happening. We have to start realizing our trust in the world matters. And our voice in the world should be believed and trusted as well. And so I hope that we can go to Israel and really, one, show them we have their backs, help be a voice that I think is true for many Americans that want them to know that they're supported, but also find out exactly what's going on the ground and the strategy that's at place.
So when I listened to your speech, it had a natural symmetry to it. And to be a bit reductionist, you opened with some comments on the administration and the Democratic Party. You then talked a little bit about some of the shortcomings or worries you have about the Republican Party. And I couldn't help but think of two names when I heard you deliver that speech, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So on these issues, these national security critical issues that you've described today, who do you think would do a better job in the White House, Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
As a voter, I put my priorities on a president who's going to have the backs of our allies and hold our enemies to account, who would secure the border, no more excuses, a president who would support capitalism and freedom, a president who understands we need less debt, not more debt. Trump has not been perfect on these policies. I've made that clear many, many times. But Biden has been a catastrophe. So I will be voting for Trump. Having said that, I stand by what I said in my suspension speech. Trump would be smart to reach out to the millions of people who voted for me and continue to support me, and not assume that they're just going to be with him. And I genuinely hope he does that.
I think my calling you Nikki might be short-lived for asking a political question after a policy speech. It's back to Ambassador Haley for me. So you were at the United Nations, and you spoke a great deal today, but also when you were UN ambassador, about the scourge of anti-Semitism, which you felt at that institution. And I think it's led a lot of our fellow Americans, in particular in the Republican Party and on the right, to essentially give up on the UN. How should we think about the UN? Are they right? Are they wrong? How should we go about considering that issue?
They're wrong. I mean, they're always wrong, and that's incredibly frustrating. And, you know, I said to my ambassador friends, and I said to the Secretary General at the time when I left, is I said, if the United Nations ever wants to truly be legitimate, they have to start talking about things that are hard to talk about. And they refuse to do that. But I look at all the Israel bashing. I look at the fact that they stood up and paused for a moment of silence for a brutal killer of innocent Iranians. I look at the fact that they continue to they lean in on China and Russia. They lean away from freedom. And so, I mean, look, I think the UN is a farce. It's disappointing. It's frustrating. It's, you know, why I worked hard to really pull money back away from it. But, you know, why do we stay? The reason we stay is one reason, and it's because America has the veto. And, you know, you've got 5 countries that have the veto: UK, France, America, China, and Russia. And if we walked away, bad things would happen. Because as Karen knows, we stopped a lot of bad things from happening. And that's the reason we stay. But it continues to show not just Americans, but a lot of the world why we're not getting a return on our investment.
Let's go semi-back to politics, because it just occurred to me as you were speaking that you might be the best equipped American, given the number of events you did in the number of states on national security issues, to give us a sense of where the American people stand on some of these big foreign policy issues. As you rolled out your policies and got feedback from voters in town halls, is there anything that particularly impressed you, surprised you, shocked you? For example, on Ukraine policy, would you say that the conventional wisdom in Washington is just off in this or that way compared to what you're hearing in Iowa, South Carolina, New Hampshire, and beyond, since you traveled so much of the country?
During the time that you know, we were campaigning, this was really when the debate of Ukraine was hot. And you were seeing more and more of this isolationist. So when we would do, you know, which was hundreds of town halls, I purposely would take a good 10 or 15 minutes to go through foreign policy, even though that's not pretty or sexy or what everybody wanted to talk about. I thought that it was a responsibility I had to let people know why they should care, because no one else is doing it. And so you had people who would come in to a town hall, and the majority of them not understand why we were dealing with Ukraine when we were dealing with a border that was completely open. And what I told them was the story, which is, here you have this freedom-loving country that was invaded by this dictator. And if you look at what a friend they've been to us, immediately everybody, all those men went to the front lines immediately to defend their country. And the women didn't stand back. They immediately started making Molotov cocktails, whatever they could do to support their men. And when everybody only gave them 5 days to survive, they kept fighting because freedom mattered. Their country mattered. And so you look at that, and Russia thought they were going to win very easily. But what happened? Russia didn't do as well as they thought. We saw that they lost 87% of their fighting forces that started the war. They raised the draft age in Russia to 65. We saw they were getting drones from Iran, missiles from North Korea. We saw Russia falling. And what happened? October 7th. There is no coincidence that here, when Russia was starting to falter and Ukraine was starting to strengthen, that all of a sudden you have Hamas invade Israel. Now, I believe October 7th, Putin's birthday, I think that was a gift from Iran to Putin. I don't think that was a coincidence. I think that day was very symbolic. But more than that, look at what we know. We know that Russian intelligence helped Iran in that attack. We also know that China was funding Iran, has been funding Iran. But why would they want this? Because all eyes were on Ukraine. And the second this happened on October 7th, what did America and the world do? We took our eyes off of Ukraine and we moved it to Israel. And that allowed Russia to strengthen up, to do the things that they did. And now you see what's happening in Israel. And no one is watching this more than China, because they paid attention to all the companies that boycotted Russia, all the countries that helped Russia. They're paying attention now to who's with Israel, who's not with Israel. They're paying attention to if America's getting tired. And Taiwan is hoping that we stand strong in Ukraine and stand strong with Israel. Because if we do, they know that that would deter China. And so all of this is connected. And I would go out and tell Americans, don't look at this as just surprisingly incidences that are happening at the same time. This is coordinated. Every bit of it's coordinated. And America needs to be smart enough to say, let's get in front of this. And the only way that will happen is when America grows a spine again. If we grow a spine, all of this will start to fix itself. If we continue down the path we're going, you can expect Taiwan to be next.
Well, I think that is the key insight, that these anti-American actors, be it the North Koreans, the Iranians, Russia, China, are all working together. And it sounds like you would describe that as almost an outright alliance of sort of anti-American actors on the Eurasian landmass. Is that a fair interpretation?
Without question. I mean, look at what North Korea is doing. North Korea is helping Russia. You've got China helping Iran. You've got, Russia helping, whether it's intelligence or anything. They're all working together, not because they love each other, but because they all hate America. And so if they are that determined to destroy us, why aren't we that determined to save us? That's the part we have to remember as Americans. And I can say, when I talked about it on the campaign trail, Americans appreciated hearing that. Once they heard how this was all connected, once they saw exactly what the entire picture was, Americans are smart, but they just need to be told why we have to care. And we have a responsibility to that. And I honestly think when you look at the vote that happened on the aid with Ukraine and with Israel and with Taiwan, that shows Americans are getting it, because those congressional members did what what their constituencies were pushing them to do. Americans want us to support Ukraine. They want us to support Israel. They want us to fight China. They want us to go and make sure that we're getting strong again. They're asking for that.
Yeah, notwithstanding what we see on college campuses, I still have a belief in the healthiness of the American sort of common sense, if that makes sense. You're often addressed as Ambassador Haley. It's a little bit of a theme what to call you during the course of these remarks. But that means that sometimes your gubernatorial tenure gets a little bit of short shrift because you're also Governor Haley. And we're here talking about national security, and the governors sometimes aren't really thought about when it comes to national security. What role do governors have as we think about national security today?
I think a huge role. A governor is responsible for the safety and security of their state and their people. And when you look at these foreign adversaries meddling, whether it's spreading misinformation, whether it is the fact that they are, buying up land, whether it's starting to, do things in ways that are intruding into our politics, those things are very real. Governors are needed now because guess what? Governors need to be pushing the ban on TikTok. Governors need to make sure that we're not just dealing with, cyber attacks on IP and stealing of that. Look at the fact that they need to be raising the red flag on critical infrastructure, our water, our power grid. Those things affect governors because if something happens, those governors are going to have to stand up and do it. And so I am a huge fan of governors. I always have been. I think that they know how to lead, they know how to protect, and they know how to get things done. And so I hope that the voices of our governors only get louder. And I think that governors, when it comes to the security and the health of their state, that's not a partisan thing. When it comes to security, that really is something where they need to be pushing their members of Congress of, what are you doing to protect our grid? What are you doing to make sure that TikTok doesn't spread misinformation? What are you doing to make sure that we have a voice in this? So I hope we hear more from our governors.
Great. Well, ma'am, I see the hour is late. It's almost 5 p.m. And so I'd like to thank our friends from the media for being here today. And for the rest of you, we have a closed press reception, which Sarah, John, and Ambassador Haley will be hosting. So we look forward to seeing you there. But before we do that, let's give Ambassador Haley a warm welcome to Hudson Institute and thank you
very much. Thank you.